I never considered myself a hopeless romantic, but when I met Rachel, something in me shifted. We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner, one of those noisy evenings where half the table is shouting over music and the other half is lost in side conversations. I was somewhere in between, sipping my drink, when she sat down beside me. Her laugh was warm, her eyes locked onto mine like I was the most interesting person in the room, and she asked questions that made me feel seen. I remember thinking, she actually cares about my answers. That's not something I felt often. We ended up talking for most of the night about our jobs, favorite movies, childhood memories, and even embarrassing moments we wouldn't normally admit to strangers. She had this charm that made everything feel light and exciting. By the time the night ended, I was hooked. Our first date was a week later, and it was perfect. Dinner at a small Italian place, a walk through the park, and an impulsive decision to sit on a bench just to watch the stars. She made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. I thought this is what love is supposed to feel like. For the first couple of months, Rachel was incredibly attentive. She'd send me sweet messages in the morning, call me on her lunch breaks, and make me playlists of songs she thought I'd like. She'd tell me I was the best thing that had ever happened to her. And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Looking back now, I realized those early days weren't just about connection. They were about her learning my patterns, my weaknesses, my insecurities. But at the time, it felt like magic. She wanted to know everything. How I handled stress, what made me feel appreciated, what I feared most in relationships. I took it as a sign she was deeply invested. Things moved quickly. Within 3 months, we were spending nearly every night together. My friends would joke that I'd disappeared since meeting her, but I didn't mind. Rachel became my entire world. She had this way of making it feel like it was us against the world. I thought I found my forever. I didn't see it then, but the groundwork for something much darker was already being laid. At first, the changes were so subtle that I didn't even recognize them as warning signs. Rachel still sent me sweet messages and told me she loved me every day, but small comments began to slip into our conversations, comments that made me doubt myself. It started with little critiques. Why do you wear that shirt? The color doesn't really suit you. Or, you always get so quiet in group settings. People might think you're boring. She'd laugh afterward, telling me she was just being honest and that it was for my own good. I told myself that honesty was important in a relationship, so I brushed it off. Then came the control disguised as care. If I mentioned hanging out with friends after work, she'd pout and say, "I just miss you when you're not here." If I insisted, she'd text me the whole time, asking who I was with, what we were talking about, and when I'd be home. At first, I thought it was just affection, that she valued my company so much she couldn't bear to be apart from me. But slowly, my social circle shrank. Friends stopped inviting me out because they knew I'd probably say no. Rachel also began to subtly rewrite my own memories. If we disagreed about something that happened, she'd insist I was remembering it wrong. "You're so forgetful sometimes," she'd say, smiling like it was a joke. Or, "You always overreact, that's not how it happened at all." I started second-guessing myself, wondering if I was being too sensitive. One night, I came home from a late meeting to find her waiting for me in the kitchen, arms crossed. "You didn't text me when you left work," she said. I was worried sick. I apologized immediately, promising to be more considerate. She hugged me, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "I just love you so much, I can't lose you." At the time, I saw it as passionate devotion. Now I see it for what it was, control wrapped in affection. The more I tried to keep her happy, the less happy I became. But I didn't notice it happening, or maybe I didn't want to notice. When someone loves you that intensely, it's easy to mistake obsession for romance. The real shift happened about 6 months into the relationship. By then, Rachel had become the center of my life. I had fewer friends, spent almost all my free time with her, and relied on her opinion for almost everything. That's when the little comments turned into full-blown criticism. It started during dinner one night. I made pasta, and she took a bite, set down her fork and sighed. "You always overcook the noodles," she said. "Why don't you ever pay attention to details? It's like you don't care." I laughed awkwardly, trying to defuse the tension, but she didn't smile. She'd just push her plate away and grab her phone. The rest of the evening was silent, and I felt like I'd failed some invisible test. From then on, she found fault in nearly everything I did, the way I folded laundry, the way I spoke to waiters, the way I drove. When I defended myself, she'd accuse me of being defensive and immature. If I stayed quiet, she'd call me cold or emotionally unavailable. Arguments became a regular part of our life, and they were always my fault. Rachel had a talent for twisting situations so that I was the one apologizing, even when I couldn't pinpoint what I'd actually done wrong. Sometimes, after a fight, she'd storm out of the apartment without telling me where she was going. When she returned hours later, she'd act like nothing happened, laughing and talking as if we hadn't just spent the evening in an emotional war zone. The worst part was how she made me feel like I needed her approval to be worth anything. She'd alternate between tearing me down and then building me back up with rare, intense affection. One night she'd say, "You're lucky I'm patient with you. Anyone else would have left by now." And the next she'd tell me, "You're the only man who's ever truly understood me." I began to live in constant anxiety, trying to predict her moods before they turned into storms. I stopped sharing my own feelings because I knew they'd either be dismissed or weaponized against me. Slowly, I started to feel like a smaller version of myself, quieter, more cautious, almost invisible. And yet I stayed. I told myself this was just a rough patch, that every couple fights, that her criticisms came from a place of love. I didn't realize at the time, but I wasn't just losing my relationship, I was losing myself. It took me far too long to realize that something was deeply wrong. The moment it clicked wasn't during one of our screaming matches or after one of her cutting remarks. It was during the silence. We were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, and I caught myself glancing at her every few minutes, trying to read her face. Was she happy? Annoyed? Bored? My entire body was tense, waiting for the smallest sign of disapproval. I realized that I wasn't even watching the movie, I was watching her. And I hated that I'd become this hyper-vigilant, anxious version of myself. A week later, I went out for coffee with my old friend Mark, someone I hadn't seen in months because Rachel didn't like him. He noticed the change in me immediately. "You look tired, man." "Like really tired," he said. I shrugged it off, but when he asked how things were with Rachel, I couldn't give him a straight answer. Instead, I mumbled something vague and changed the subject. But that conversation stuck in my head for days. The breaking point came after a work trip. I'd been gone for 3 days, and when I got back, Rachel greeted me at the door with tears in her eyes. Not happy tears, but angry ones. "You didn't call me enough," she snapped. "I called you every night," I reminded her. "Yeah, but you didn't sound like you missed me. Do you even care anymore?" The fight escalated fast. She accused me of being ungrateful, of neglecting her, of becoming just like all the other men who'd hurt her in the past. I felt myself shutting down. The more she yelled, the less I wanted to be there at all. That night, after she finally fell asleep, I sat in the dark living room, staring at my phone. My finger hovered over Mark's contact, but I didn't call. Instead, I opened my browser and typed, "Signs of emotional abuse." I read article after article, and with each one, the weight in my chest grew heavier. It was like someone had been describing my life without knowing me. Gaslighting, isolation, constant criticism, mood swings, walking on eggshells. It was all there. For the first time, I thought I need to get out. But leaving Rachel wasn't going to be simple. She had a way of pulling me back in, of convincing me that the problem was me, not her. And I knew, deep down, that if I tried to end it, she'd make it her mission to win me back. I didn't plan the breakup. It wasn't one of those moments where you rehearse what you're going to say in the mirror and finally gather the courage to speak. It happened on a rainy Thursday night, during yet another argument that spiraled out of control. It started over something trivial. I forgot to buy the oat milk she liked. But within minutes, she turned it into a full-blown character assassination. "You never listen. You don't care about me. You only think about yourself." Something inside me just snapped. I didn't yell back this time. I didn't try to defend myself or explain. I just sat there, letting her words wash over me like cold rain. And then I heard myself say it. "Rachel, I can't do this anymore." She froze. For a second, I saw genuine shock on her face. Then the anger came, sharp and blinding. "Oh, so you're just going to throw away everything we built? You're going to give up on us?" "This isn't US," I said quietly. "This is me being miserable every day." She cried then, big dramatic sobs. She told me she loved me, that she couldn't live without me, that I was the only person who'd ever truly understood her. It was the same cycle I'd seen before. Break me down, then flood me with affection to pull me back in. But something was different this time. I didn't feel the usual guilt. I didn't feel the need to fix it. I just felt done. When I stood up to leave, she switched tactics again, her voice going cold. "You'll regret this. No one else will put up with you the way I have." I walked out anyway. My hands were shaking, my chest felt tight, and part of me wanted to turn back. But I kept walking. For the first time in months, I breathed air that didn't feel heavy. Over the next week, the messages started. Long paragraphs about how much she missed me. Pictures of places we'd been together. Then came the guilt trips, reminders of things she'd done for me. Accusations that I'd used her. Well, that didn't work. The insults came back. I didn't respond to any of them. Every time my phone buzzed, I reminded myself of the articles I'd read, the way I'd felt in that living room, the way my life had shrunk around her. Still, some nights, lying in bed alone, I'd hear her voice in my head, whispering those old lines, "No one will love you like I do." And I'd wonder, not if leaving was the right choice, but why it had taken me so long. The first month after leaving Rachel was a blur. I wish I could say I felt instant relief, but that wouldn't be the truth. There were nights when I questioned myself, mornings when I woke up expecting to see her next to me, and moments when the silence of my apartment felt heavier than her presence ever had. But little by little, the weight started to lift. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in ages. Mark was the first. He invited me to a small barbecue, and for the first time in months, I laughed without worrying about who was watching. I started going for evening runs, not to escape my thoughts, but to clear them. I read books I put off for years, rediscovered music I loved, and even tried cooking again, overcooked pasta and all. One of the hardest parts of healing was untangling Rachel's voice from my own. I catch myself hesitating to wear certain clothes because they didn't suit me, or rewriting a text 3 times because I didn't want to sound boring. That's when I realized her words had carved deep grooves in my self-esteem. Breaking the habit of self-criticism was like learning to walk again. Therapy helped. My therapist didn't just listen, she gave me tools. She taught me how to recognize manipulation, how to set boundaries, and how to sit with discomfort without letting it dictate my choices. Most importantly, she reminded me that love isn't supposed to make you feel small. Months later, I got an email from Rachel. It was short. Just, "I hope you're happy. I'm sorry for how things went." I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed closure from her. I'd already found it in the quiet mornings with my coffee, in the laughter of friends, in the moments I looked in the mirror and actually liked the person staring back. Looking back, I see that leaving wasn't just about walking away from Rachel. It was about walking back toward myself. If you're reading this and you're in a relationship that constantly makes you doubt your worth, I want you to know it's not love if it costs you your self-respect. And you're allowed to leave. You're allowed to heal. I'm living proof that life after toxicity isn't just possible, it's worth it.